Hello and welcome to the Fair Play podcast from Pennington's Manchester Cooper LLP. My name is Tom Pimenta. I'm an associate in the employment team. In this series, we're looking at the road to the Olympics and Paralympic Games to try and understand just what it takes to compete at the highest level of sport. We'll look at a range of stages in an athlete's career, from the discovery of talent, getting the backing needed to train and develop, qualifying for the team, and how to overcome bumps in the road to take your place at the final competition and strive for the podium. So we're joined today by Bobby Clay. She's a former elite middle distance runner. Bobby represented Great Britain at the World Championships and made the under-20 team for the IAF World Championships at the age of 15. Having won the title for the under-20 European 1500 metres in 2015 at the age of 18, Bobby was expected to be a household name in a matter of years. However, she was training harder than she should have been, as well as underfueling by not eating enough to support her training regime. As a result of this, she suffered from relative energy deficiency in sport, or REDS. This resulted in her never having had a period even at 20 years old, and she was diagnosed with osteoporosis in her late teens. Bobby had to stop running, and her absence from the sport is a real loss to future Olympic rosters for Team GB. She now passionately speaks about women's health and the importance of a menstrual cycle in sport to try and resolve the myths within the industry. So thank you very much for coming in today, Bobby, to discuss your journey.
Thank you for having me.
Bobby, what was your first memory of the games?
I think it was in 2004, so I was 7. And I don't think it was one race in particular. My parents were watching it in my living room, and I can remember jumping up and down on the sofa, just cheering anyone and everyone. And then my parents getting really excited for Kelly Holmes, really, really excited. And I can remember thinking, gosh, this is special. And I got a funny feeling in my belly, that I would love this. And I hadn't really had that feeling before. So I think it was just the eruption of my living room is probably my first memory.
So it's a great story. Obviously, Kelly Holmes did incredible things in the sport as well. I remember those same races as well. How did you? I mean, what got you into running specifically? Because obviously, the Olympics covers such a broad range of sports. What got you into running, and what was your proudest moment from your early career?
My mum already ran, and she would go out for runs, and all I wanted to be was like my mum. And initially I went out with her on my pink and purple Cindy bike, and then just begged and begged and begged, please let me run, please let me run. And I think initially my dad was a bit like, you'll slow your mum down. And I went out for my first run, and I absolutely didn't. And like I said, it was probably a similar time to the Olympics. I was probably about 7. And it became quite clear then that it was something I was good at, and I liked being good. And I suppose my proudest early memory was getting my first England vest at English Schools Champs. And I think it was the first time I ever built up for a race. And I knew going into that race there was an opportunity to get an England vest, and I knew I was going to get it. And I think my parents became very aware in the build up to that race of our daughter could do something really special.
No, definitely. I mean, I can imagine I've seen in looking at your career, you're racing above age groups quite regularly. And as you say, getting an England vest, it's sort of at that point must be when you realise you are of the level that you need. You're of the level that you want to be at that elite level of competition. I mean, when was that the moment, or was there another moment when you realised that you had an exceptional talent and you could compete at that level? When did you feel like you'd arrived, I suppose, in that sense?
I think that England vest was the first step to me believing in me. I think I suppose the moment where I was very noticed was when I raced up an age group. So I raced in the under-20s, but I was an under-17. At Euro trials. That was cross-country as well in Liverpool. And I ran myself into the team, but you had to be 16 within the year, and I wasn't. And I don't think it's particularly nice, this little whippersnapper running themselves into the team and then still not being able to go.
Yeah.
And I think in my heart, for some reason, I thought the rules could change for me, and they can't.
Yeah, sure.
But I think that was the moment where people realised that actually I'm here to prove a point. And also I think the older girls realised, God, we've got her for years now.
Yeah, she'll be coming in at that level and still competing for many years.
And I think part of that I really loved. But missing out on being able to race at Euros that year made me hungry for it. Because in my eyes, I'd ran myself into the team. I suppose as a youngster, you don't see the implications of actually you are too young.
Do you think that's right? I mean, do you think that is right, that rule, that you have to be a certain age to race in that? Obviously, we'll touch on obviously what's happened at later points in your career, but do you think that rule is a sensible one? You know?
I do, because there is opportunity to compete internationally.
Yeah, you just be an age down.
Yeah, and when I've got my England vest for England schools, that's you are competing internationally, you've got the pride of the vest, but you aren't under the pressure of the under-20 competition.
Sure.
Where you are very much expected to be able to manage yourself as an athlete, because typically you're 18 years old, you're not 15.
Yeah.
I think the fact that I was allowed to run the trial is arguably an issue. But like I say, if I'd been 16 within the year, it wouldn't have been a problem.
Sure.
Is that in itself an issue? Maybe.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, how did it feel to represent your country? You talk about the England vest. What was that like?
The England vest, I think, was, I knew that was where I wanted to go with my running. And I flew over to Ireland with my dad, and it was a great time. It was very relaxed because it was home nations and things like that. When it got to my first GB vest, and I realised I really am a baby on the team, that was hugely exciting for me. I expected to be massively nervous, and it became apparent throughout my career that wasn't the way I worked. I'd be nervous for trials because I knew I needed to get on the plane.
Sure.
But as soon as I qualified, I would begin to relax, and I don't know, I think I thrived in the fact that anything I do now, this is me at my best. This is me doing what I love. Do
you think it was would you say it's an element of, once you've qualified with the trials, you belong at that category, that level, that age group, and then the performance, you've earned that, you're there. Do you think that was a fair
yeah, definitely
view?
It is that thing of, I've got to pull it out on the day, because anything can happen, particularly with cross.
Sure.
Anything can happen. I've got to pull it out on the day. Once I'd done that and I qualified and I knew I was going to the major champs, that was my playground. To me, that was that's when it became really fun.
Sure. No, that makes sense. And at that early stage, you made such a promising start to your career. What were your aims at the time? What were your hopes for that?
I think a big stepping stone is being, for anyone in any sport, is being noticed by brands.
Sure.
And it's not because of the free kit or the financial incentive at all. It's the fact of, you can now call yourself a professional, and that's all I wanted to be, was a professional athlete. I did go to Loughborough University. I've always been very academic, but that was just kind of, I suppose, a route where my parents could breathe and relax, that I had a plan B, shall we say, to do what I really wanted to do. So I think, getting sponsorship was big for me, because I suddenly realised that not only was I a name within my sport, but I was enough of a name that someone wanted to pay me to do it.
Sure.
And that potentially I could live on it.
And your name sells products. Your name is has recognition, I suppose,
Yeah.
is the point. Yeah. No, that makes sense. And obviously you were doing all of these things at such an early age. What was it like managing, school, uni, as you say, at the time, alongside your athletics career? How did you find that?
School was much more difficult than university, only because of the hours that you have contact in school.
Yeah. Sure.
I had a very understanding group of friends. I, by no means, was very sociable whatsoever. And that's not due to personality, it was due to time constraints. And my friends were hugely supportive, hugely understanding. I was invited to everything, but they never took it personally if I couldn't go. I missed a lot of things. Like I missed my end of year prom because I was at Europeans, and my friends are probably sad about, I missed the fact I missed sports day near enough every year. Sure. But I'd get off the plane and they'd have some kind of party organised for me.
Yeah.
So I was massively lucky, massively lucky, but I spent every lunchtime in the library because my parents would say, schoolwork comes first.
Yeah.
If you want to be at training tonight, your schoolwork needs to be done.
Sure.
So it was every single lunchtime in the library. I was at a very high pressure school, which meant when I went to university and the contact times went down and everything became about my sport, I suddenly realised how many hours normal people, shall we say, have in the day. And I could actually begin to live the way I should have been living previously in terms of fueling and resting, because there was time to do it. Yeah.
And I mean, touching on that, living the right way and from a fueling and training the right amount. One of the key aspects that we're looking at in this series is safeguarding, and trying to look at safeguarding, look at training, how to do this the right way. What sorts of training were you doing in your teens, and did you think that was normal at the time?
I knew I was doing a lot, but I was under the impression that I was that special that I could run away from problems.
Sure. Quite literally, yeah.
Yeah. And I thought that it couldn't be me. It wouldn't be me to run into issues. I was lucky enough that my sister, near enough, did everything with me. She was on the GB team with me. Sure. So we did a lot together, which meant we were kind of our own little unit. We had our coach, but we were kind of our own little unit. We didn't really need anyone else. And I think that's where some problems arise, because when you've got two hugely competitive young ladies.
Yeah. And sibling rivalry anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we're feeding each other the same narrative. And when you ask a question and you get the answer you want, you're going to keep asking that person.
Sure. Yeah.
So the two of us had a lot of fun together, but we were doing crazy amounts. I was doing 120-mile weeks at 15, 16. My parents were completely unaware of the amount of training I was doing. My coach at the time, I feel like maybe naively didn't consider the fact I'm not just a shrunken man. I was a young girl who maybe wasn't functioning the way I should have been functioning, but I was functioning well enough to perform
on the track,
and that trumps everything.
I mean, to put it into context, because obviously I'm not an elite runner. Some of our listeners won't be. 120-mile weeks. What sort of? So who should be doing that amount of training, and for what type of distance, really? If that's a
100, that's kind of a marathon runner's big week.
Yeah, sure. And you were doing this regularly.
I don't think at any point, even in the summer, that I would touch under 80 miles a week. This all changed when I went to university.
Sure.
I changed coaches, changed setups. My training was cut in half.
Yeah.
Because I got there and was literally told, "What the hell are you doing?"
Yeah, sure.
And it became very clear to me all of a sudden, actually, no one else is doing this, and I'm really, really bloody tired all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was silly amounts, and it impacted every single aspect of my life other than training.
Yeah. No, I can imagine. I mean, it would take take over your life in that period. Is so much of your week spent running, recovering, or preparing for your next run, really. And I mean, at the time, what sorts of things? You say that no one was necessarily aware of the full extent of the training necessarily, but what comments would you get from your family, from your friends, from your coaches about your exercise or weight or anything like that, anything performance related?
My friends were massively concerned. And I think they saw a very different body to what I saw.
Sure.
They were massively concerned about how diddy I was. I was so little. My dad was near enough pulling his hair out. It's probably why he's bald now. Because he was so stressed. And he felt like I was functioning as a little boy. And I was built like a little boy. And that wasn't right. My coach at the time, I feel like, was very swept up by the fact that I was performing, and with funding from my governing body and my sponsor and everything else, a coach often sees some financial benefits there too. And in athletics, we've got so many volunteer coaches, which is absolutely tremendous. But a lot of those coaches, their dream probably is to coach full-time, not to have a full-time job and coach on the side.
Sure.
And when you see that as a possibility, I think then an athlete might become a commodity. And
so almost their route into, yeah, I could do this full-time because I've coached Bobby Clay, I've coached,
And I'm not by any means saying that anything was done purposefully. I just think people get caught up in the moment.
Sure.
But the moment seemed to last a long time and was very lucrative for all. And I got comments when, the odd occasion, I would be concerned about my body, of, I'm just starting to question how much you really want this. And to say something like that to me at the time,
the amount you're pushing yourself already,
was hugely detrimental, and I became very switched off to any form of bodily concern or regulation. It was just hit my target times, race well, and things will be okay.
And how did it impact what you ate as well? You're saying one of the aspects is underfueling. How did it impact what you were eating? Did you think that was I suppose a negative when you're training so hard? But maybe I could be a bit faster if I hadn't had as much for the day before or something like that. Did that impact it at all?
I'm almost a bit of a strange case because I definitely had disordered eating. But I don't think I was in the grips of an eating disorder.
Sure.
My whole idea of what was enough fuel was just wrong. I was surrounded by athletes who were in the really, really struggling with food. And their relationship with food was so warped that me being on the bus with my team eating something is more than nothing. So I was always seen as the eater. I was always seen as the person who ate a lot. I was often given comments about my thunder thighs or my boulder shoulders or parts of my body which appeared bigger than other girls. Which almost reassured me that actually there's nothing wrong with me. The people who thought there's something not right here were my friends at school.
Because they're not in that environment.
No, and all they could see was this tiny body which was only getting smaller. And what used to be a very loud friend only getting quieter.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, these comments, you say we mentioned boulder shoulders or thunder thighs and things like that. Do they play on your mind when you're running, when you're thinking, can I push myself a little bit more here, or equally when you're thinking, I'm hungry, I need to eat something, shall I have option A or option B? Do those comments, would they come into your thinking at all at the time?
I think it's very easy whenever something was hard was to blame your body shape or your body size.
Yeah.
I suffered quite a severe foot injury way back, way before I went to university, and it was in the build-up for European trials. And I hadn't ran for absolutely weeks. I'd cross-trained like a lunatic because in my head I was going to do trials and I was going to run myself into the team.
Yeah.
I did exactly that, but I was blowing and it was harder than it's sort of ever been for me to run myself into the team. I mean, I hadn't ran for 3 months. It was always going to be hard.
Yeah.
I hadn't lost any fitness. I hadn't gained any weight whatsoever. But the second it was hard, in my head, it was, you're too heavy.
I see.
And it was, your thighs are too big. How do you expect to carry yourself? And it's just me. It was almost me reflecting everything that's been said to me previously. I don't know whether it affected my food choices because my dad was very, very conscious and aware. I always had very healthy meals at home. I always ate my dinner at home because my dad's a great cook. But it was when I wasn't in the home environment that if someone's eating nothing next to me, well, I might eat some fruit.
Yeah.
And
sure.
even then, I'm deemed to be, again, the eater.
Yeah. It's very, I find it very hard to understand that, having not, like I say, not been in that environment. And it's quite a hard, it must have been a really difficult thing from your perspective to navigate that, because you are in an environment where people are training to that level, that you're competing with each other as well. I mean, do you think that there's an element where, I mean, you had your sister, but would you talk to others about these types of things, or would you think, oh, well, they're already thinking of me as the eater, as you say? Did that alter it at all?
I think the issue is, and I can only speak from being a woman and a young lady, everything is a competition.
Yeah.
So even eating became competition. Who could eat the least? Who could be the leanest? All striving to be the fastest, but that almost got lost in it.
Yeah.
It was who could be the best, what an athlete's meant to be. Who the hell knows what an athlete's meant to be? But we all had some kind of idea in our heads.
Yeah.
And a group of girls becomes quite competitive, and I think there's a level of gatekeeping. Everyone wants to gatekeep what they're doing, what they're eating, what their plan is.
You don't want to give an advantage to anyone else,
no,
really, or show weakness, I suppose.
And there's a strange thing of everyone on the start line is almost, because it's so high pressured as kids, is trying to say how little they've done, just in case it goes wrong.
You've got your excuse ready, yeah.
Yeah, and I was never that athlete. If someone asked me what I'd done, I would be more than happy to say what I was hitting in training, because I knew it'd scare the hell out of people.
Yeah. Sure.
And I think there was almost a bit of a boyish nature to me because I didn't understand that. I didn't understand that way of thinking. I didn't want an excuse at the start because I felt like that was speaking into the universe that I was going to need one.
It's almost a negative mindset at the outset, isn't it? Yeah.
And I think being as much as I could around the male athletes was probably a good thing for me, because on camps, they would go up and it became almost a competition of who could eat the most.
Yeah, sure.
So you almost have two camps and both camps are uncomfortable.
Yeah. No one's happy with what they're actually eating. Yeah. Doesn't sound the best, yeah. And I mean, one of the big issues, obviously, in your situation was obviously you didn't have a period until very quite late in life. When were you concerned that you hadn't had a period, and what medical advice were you seeking, and what were you told, really?
So me personally, I wore it as a badge of honour and I was not concerned at any point.
Sure.
I thought, I became very aware if you are below a certain body percentage, if you're lean enough, your body won't let you have a period. So the fact I hadn't had one was just a signal of I'm in shape.
You're lean enough. Yeah.
I'm competition ready. And to me, and I would say the majority of female athletes, at least at the time, hopefully not so much now, it is a badge of honour. That's your true athlete.
Okay.
To my mum, she was hugely concerned. She took me to the doctors at 16 and they were told, she does a lot of sport. It's okay. That's normal. That's fine. She's literally the pinnacle of health. She's in the newspaper.
Yeah.
And then we did the same thing at 17, and they just continued to feed my narrative, and I'd go kicking and screaming and walk out smiling, and it was just a continuous loop of that. I feel like my mum felt very unseen and very unheard and was hugely concerned with no help.
Sure. And I mean, so with that advice, you suppose you got the medical seal of approval at that point. Presumably you think everything's fine because of that. And then with you've bravely discussed on a number of occasions relative energy deficiency in sport, so REDS, and how that then caused your osteoporosis at such an early age. I mean, I think you said you broke your foot when swimming one time. When did you become aware that this wasn't simply a really freak injury, but in the standard sort of context? These things can happen. When did you realise that was a strange injury to have? Really?
I realised so at this point in time I was at university, and I changed coaches and I was feeling great, and my setup was brilliant. When I broke my foot, I was actually on my end of season break. That's why I was in the pool, and I had my first run back and hadn't said anything to my coach about my broken foot, and I ran out. I was just meant to be doing, I think, about a 4-mile shakeout. I ran out for 2 miles in a straight line and had to ring my sister because I couldn't turn a corner. So I knew my foot was bad, but at this point I still thought, I've done something stupid. It will be fine. I've healed a lot of things in my life. And when my coach found out how I did it, I knew I was going to be going for a scan of my foot. I thought it was a very standard procedure. And when I got there, I had a scan of my foot, then I had a whole body DEXA scan, then I had an internal scan. And I think at that point I started to think, hey, we're looking at everything almost but my foot.
Yeah.
Just scan my foot and let me go.
I've got to do some more running really to get back on the track.
I just thought, what on earth is going on? Why? And my coach said, we're massively concerned you shouldn't be breaking your foot in a pool. I thought, you've known me for a long time and you've coached me now for a year. I am a mystery for a lot of things that I do. Come on. I almost thought, get a grip. Well, put me in a boot for 6 weeks. I'll be at European trials.
Yeah.
And then the results of my DEXA scan came back, and unfortunately, they got sent back to my home. And my mum said, it looks like a medical letter. Do you want me to open it?
Sure.
And for once I thought, God, she's actually asking to open my post. I was like, yeah, just open it.
Yeah. Do you think it'd be fine?
Yeah, and I just continued with my day, and she rang me and was in floods of tears because it just didn't say any advice. It just said I had osteoporosis.
Sure.
And I mean, anyone, the majority of people would see that word and think of an 80-year-old woman who's broken her hip.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot to process for my mum, and at that point I was just in denial.
Yeah. I mean, what did you said you injured your foot in the pool and then you were still running. You ran 2 miles or so and then you're like, okay, I can't turn either way. What were you expecting? I suppose you got the obviously you found out later it's osteoporosis, but what were you expecting? Some kind of twist, sprain, break or something?
Some kind of fracture in my foot.
Yeah. Sure. So it's quite a dramatic difference then.
Yeah. And I think to a normal person, a broken foot is quite significant. But to me, I was like, we'll boot it. I'll do my rehab in the gym for 6 weeks and then I'll just build back running and I'll be at European trials.
Sure.
I almost thought to myself, I've timed this perfectly.
Yeah.
Which again, that blasé nature of, to me, fractures and whatever else wasn't a warning sign of, something's wrong with your body. It was, I'm doing this perfectly because I'm just on the edge. I
see. So you're training so much that you're training at your absolute maximum, because if you train any more, you're injured. If you train any less, then you're not injured. So you're using that as a barometer. Is that what the logic was? Yeah, I see. Yeah, no, it's difficult. I mean, it's obviously, it must have been a lot to process too. have that explanation given that it is something much bigger than spraying a brake or some kind of injury based on turning them away or something like that, or twisting or something on those lines. And I mean, REDS can impact men and women. What do you think? What more do you think can be done to raise awareness of this? And what are the signs that you'd say are important to look out for in an athlete?
I think in terms of raising more awareness of this is the actual harsh truth of what it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't just look like the convenience of not having a period.
Yeah.
And that athlete looks great, looks like what we all have in our mind as a distance athlete or
Mm-hmm.
whatever athlete they are. It's more what it actually looks like. It looks like lying on the floor asleep and missing family Christmas celebrations. It looks like missing everything at school because you don't have the energy to even speak and socialise with your friends. It looks like passing out on the bus. It's not glamorous and it's not okay.
Sure.
And I suppose that sort of seeps into the signs and symptoms of, if you can't do everyday life, who cares if you're hitting target times on the track?
Sure.
Because who are you to anyone? And I think that became very clear when running was taken away. I was nothing and I was no one because I'd never tried to be. And then to work out who you are becomes very difficult. And that's a whole identity issue, and that's a whole nother aspect of sport. But it is that if you can't function as a normal human being, let's get that in check first. And as women, we have the absolute alarm bell of the menstrual cycle.
Yeah.
And we should be guided by that and listen to that. Because at 19, when I was told the likelihood is you're infertile, I didn't care. I didn't care because all I wanted to do was run. Why would I want a bump on the front of me and a child?
Yeah.
That is not going to help me. I'm not going to run parkrun with a pram, was all I thought.
I mean, some people do. But
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
The thought of it now.
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah.
I see, that's again, I glamorise that
Yeah,
now because I'm like, oh, I'd love it.
No, I understand.
But it's my poor mum
Yeah,
who sat there
of course.
thinking, this 19-year-old girl has no idea what she's doing. And I potentially won't be a grandmother because this decision has been taken away from her probably at the age of 14, 15.
Yeah.
Without any of us knowing. So being guided by that menstrual cycle is massively important for women. Men don't have that. But at the same time, in society, if a man lost his libido for any other reason, there would be alarm bells and people would be stressed. So we've got young men who are just remaining silent because were they to say, actually, I have no libido, I have no sex drive, you're not really a man. So I think it's listening to those huge alarm bells of, we have them for a reason, and they actually are hugely important for life. But if you can't do life, then what is hitting sub 3 minute Ks for reps?
What's
means
taking
nothing.
that many seconds off your time and things? It makes sense. And I mean, I suppose it's useful signs, as you say, for a woman, if you're not having a menstrual cycle, don't simply say it's because I'm at that perfect weight, I'm at that perfect physical health, I'm so lean, I don't my body doesn't need it, kind of thing, because you do need it as part of life. Even if you don't want children later, it's still part of your development and your growth. And then obviously as a man, I suppose it's the libido side of things, and that's another big factor in life as well, really. I mean, if you could rewrite your training regimes, appreciate you said when you went to uni, you had it to the level that you wanted it, and if you had that all along, that would be your sort of ideal way. I mean, if you could rewrite it, what would you do? And do you think there's anyone at the time who could have said something that would have changed your track at that stage?
If I were to have a redo, I probably would have never have left my first coach.
Okay.
My first coach was all grass-based training, so already we were lowering the impact.
Yeah.
It was all about fun. It was all about the love of the sport. I've never met someone who loves athletics the way this man does. And he, I suppose, is one of the reasons I fell so in love with the sport. And I got my first England vest, my first Great Britain vest, all those first, I got with him. It was the whispers from the other side of, but we could make you the best.
Yeah.
That I rushed into. And I'm impatient, and I feel like I'm better, but I'm an impatient human being, and I'm impulsive, and I'm driven to the point of probably insanity. And that's all great, providing that it's harnessed. And I think my first coach did the best he could.
Yeah.
So were I to do a redo, I would have stayed with him for a much longer time and kept it the fun of, I love
The
running.
sport. Yeah.
Because I was getting the successes.
True.
Just enjoyed it more.
Yeah.
And then moving to my university coach, he was tremendous as well. And I had a great experience with him. So maybe it would have been a smoother transition to him, because I wouldn't have had the dramatic cut of half my mileage and have to get over that. And I think there's many things that I would change, but also at the same time wouldn't, because I've got to rationalise it somehow, and maybe it happened to me for a reason.
Yeah.
Because I don't mind talking.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just think keeping it fun for longer would have been massively helpful for me. Remembering I was a child and that there are other things in life than just running around in circles.
Well, I mean, I think the other thing with we often find, so we've done a number of these podcast episodes discussing different careers with different people. I mean, one of the things that comes out is the point where an injury can come, for example. I know it's a different situation in your case, but sometimes it might be, let's say, a contact sport, and the individual gets a major injury that means they're a few seconds slower, or they are not as strong, or they can't put as much weight on that particular side. And I think one of the things that comes out is just how quickly any sporting career can just come to an end anyway. And I think one of the things we see is, I'm always impressed with, and I've seen it clearly here with you, that the ability to see the bigger picture in life as a whole, and your the angles of that wasn't obviously what you intended to happen. It wasn't what you wanted to happen. However, there's all these other things going forward, and obviously now you've got the other things that you can do with these things. You can talk about these things. You can teach others how to avoid these types of issues in future. And I mean, with that in mind, what would you, if you're talking to the next 14, 15-year-old Bobby Clay right now, what would you like prospective Olympic or Paralympic hopefuls to take from your story? What would you think what would you want them to take?
I think the biggest thing is finding out who you are before you're forced to. And you can't find out who you are via one avenue. And you can do your training in the morning, in the evening, whatever you're going to do. That's absolutely fine. Absolutely. Go, like, I'm never going to tell someone, do less, train less, because I don't think that message necessarily works. It's more, okay, meet the need. So meet the demand. So if we're training here, let's meet it with the fuel. I think young athletes can only do so much for themselves, because ultimately they are answering to someone. And they are trying to make sure they hit those target times that someone else has set.
Sure.
So now this is about coach education. And of course, I appreciate that in athletics we have got volunteer coaches. But to get that coaching license, there should be education on training young girls.
Yeah.
Because we're not training many men.
Mm.
And unfortunately,
there's that perception.
That's what happens. And by no means, I'm not saying women and men shouldn't train together. My goodness, I had the best training sessions and the most fun with the boys I trained with.
Yeah.
And they will always be amazing memories for me. And also, I loved beating the boys.
Yeah, I was going to say, imagine.
I absolutely loved it. At one point, I had an anklet which had a bell on it.
Yeah.
I can remember one of the boys halfway through a training session turning to me and said, I hear that bloody bell in my nightmares.
Just coming faster. Yeah.
Of course you do. But it's more, to get that coaching license, I think there should be certain things that are in place, and it should be the education about REDS. So let's safeguard the men as well, the young boys as well, but also about how to train a young lady, how to open up conversation from the age of 7 about periods.
Yeah.
Or younger than 7. It never be you have to hit a certain milestone for that conversation to be had. It's an open conversation. The boys are there, male coaches are there, girls are there, female coaches are there, where it's just part and parcel of, if someone were to have a sore ankle or something like that, they're more than happy to tell the group, I've got a sore ankle, I need to back off, whatever it is. There should never be a girl sat there thinking, I'm actually massively uncomfortable, or I actually need to change my product and I've got 30 seconds between reps to do it.
Yeah.
It's just not feasible.
No.
And no girl's going to speak up and say, actually, I need to miss a rep.
Yeah.
She's just going to be uncomfortable the whole time instead. So I think it is, the onus isn't all on the athlete, and it's taken me a very long time to understand that, because I internalized and blamed myself for a lot of upset for a lot of people, and ultimately I was a child.
Yeah, of course. I mean, do you have you got involved with coaching and things? Is that something that you'd look to do at some point?
Not yet. And I think because I'm so aware I want quality coaching and quality coaches who know what they're doing, I feel like at this point in my life, I can speak on my own experience, and I can speak on things that I have personally done a lot of research in and spoken to the best people in the field.
Sure.
So when it comes to me speaking about overtraining, REDS, menstrual cycle, I feel like I have a valuable input. When it comes to coaching, I would have to, because I always want to be the best at what I do, I would have to actually understand, okay, this is the female body, and this is what it needs. And I feel like I haven't got the understanding of the actual physical side of stuff.
Sure.
I'm not ever say, I'd never say never, because I love the sport.
Yeah.
But I think at an athletics club, there should always be a women's health advocate champion.
Yeah.
There is plenty of resources now. I think people are just choosing to close their eyes.
I mean, I think that was one of the, particularly again, key themes of our previous series was on the life of a female athlete, just to try and highlight some of these points that you're covering now, and then in the idea that a lot of the sports, a lot of the training, a lot of the coaching is, and you know, in for example, in football, in women's football, some of the boots were originally designed for male knees. So, you know, when someone lands, it's based on simulations of what happens when a man lands versus when a woman lands. And there was obviously a lot of different knee injuries as a result in women's football until, you know, relatively recently, where they started to change the boots. But that's one of the things that we think that we're looking at with these podcasts, is to try and understand what are those discrepancies and what needs to change. And I think that's a really helpful suggestion, really, that you've made in terms of having someone who's an advocate about women's health and will have those conversations with the female athletes at that stage and say, look, these are the things to watch out for. This isn't a badge of honor, not having a period. This is something to be concerned about. This is something you do need to consider eating this amount. If you're doing more exercise than the normal person, you need to be eating more than the normal person. It's not as simple as you need to be really, really lean as well.
Anyone, young man or young woman, who just needs to say how they're truly feeling is more than welcome to message me, because a lot of the time, you know something isn't right, but you don't want to tell someone who's going to tell you to stop. And I'll never tell you to stop, but I'll always listen.
Sure. Well, thank you for your time, Bobby. It's been really, really interesting, really insightful, and thanks for sharing all your experiences.
No, thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for listening. We'll be writing a follow-up article on some of the issues raised during this podcast. But if you have any questions that you want to discuss with us further, please contact us on our Sports Podcast email address, which is sportspodcasts@penningtonslaw.com, or you can get in touch with me with the details on this episode. Thank you.